joined here by amazing angel advocates and leading clinicians who are going to be discussing critical topics today about biomarkers, clinical trials, and equity and access to healthcare, which right now is such an important topic given everything that's going on. We're going to be hearing their personal experience and professional expertise that'll help all of us better understand how we can advocate for ourselves and our communities, which is more important now than ever. But first, I want to make sure that we all know that this is a space we're going to co-create together. This is a space where we're going to hear from lived experience, clinical expertise, and community wisdom of all of you to create this really important space where we can have an empowering conversation that's going to lead us out of today. So first, though, we need to know who's on the panel with us today. So each of our panelists is going to share briefly about their name, organization, if it fits, expertise, and how they're connected to the Choice program. And I'm going to start with Kai.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kai Pollard. I am a 5-year breast cancer survivor. I am a Tigerlily Foundation Angel Advocate. Thank you. She was diagnosed with both triple negative and HER2 positive cancer. By the time I found my cancer, I had 4 tumors. One, the biggest tested triple negative, and the ones that were trailing toward my armpit were HER2 positive. I have spent 19 years in clinical trials and biomarker research, and I am here today to take that knowledge that I have of my journey and my expertise and bring it to the community.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eunice. I am currently a Tigerlily Angel Advocate. I've been with Tigerlily for over 2 years, a little over 2 years. I also have clinical trial experience. I've been a clinical trial participant for over 20 years. And I am also working with the Choice Project, and it's been a wonderful honor. I currently have over 25 years of experience as a breast imaging specialist. And I will be talking to you more today about clinical trials.
Hi everyone, I am Patience Odenai. I'm an oncologist, so I take care of children and young adults with solid tumors. I'm also a scientist, so I study cancers that have different mutations, such as RAS and PIK3CA and EGFR, HER2 amplification. So my passion is discovering targeted therapies for cancer, so similar to the ones that are used for breast cancer, that are less morbid and more effective than chemotherapy. And I got involved with this organization through Kai. We worked together in the lab a few years ago now. She taught me all the things I knew about growing up cancer cells and treating them with different drugs and learning about these targets. So I'm really happy to participate in the panel today.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Canzaniero. I'm a breast medical oncologist at Hopkins. So I focus on the treatment of patients with breast cancer. I also have a translational research lab, and I lead the Precision Medicine Initiative for the Breast and Gyne Cancers program at Hopkins, where we're working on trying to match patients to the best possible treatments that are tailored to them based on genetic findings of their cancer. And so I work a lot in the lab and then also with clinical trials to kind of develop that. And I got involved with this program because I am blessed to have as my patients a couple of wonderful patient advocates, including Ms. Pollard there. So I'm very happy to be here with you and have the opportunity to talk with you all today.
So as you can see, we have an amazing panel today, so I know this is going to be a great conversation. So we're just going to jump right in. And first, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what's a biomarker. How many people know what a biomarker is? Oh. There won't be a quiz, I promise. but just in case, so we're all on the same page. A biomarker is a measurable biological characteristic that gives us information about how the body is functioning. So that's a really important data point as we turn. I'm going to turn to Kai, because Kai, I want to ask, how has this Tigerlily Choice program helped you understand biomarkers better?
So I must say that I do have quite a long history working with biomarkers, and So what the CHOICE program has done for me is it has helped me understand how to take what I know about biomarkers as a scientist and bring it to the community that needs it the most. As I was going through my own journey, I did have a lot of experience with biomarkers and clinical trials, et cetera. But as a patient, I felt like it was just so hard to understand my options because I hadn't studied breast cancer. I'd studied pediatric cancer. My options and my biomarkers were different than what I knew. And so I had a lovely oncologist as my boss who took the time to walk me through my own journey and help me understand my options. And that really showed me that patients need that support. Even me with that background, I struggled to understand, are these therapies really the best option for me? Is there better? Should I do more research? And, to have someone hold my hand through that was incredible. So the CHOICE program has taught me how to pay it forward. The advocate that I had when I needed it, I want to pay that forward to the other patients that come after me and they need it the most. Biomarkers help us do things like determine our cancer types. Again, I was triple negative. That meant that I was actually missing 3 biomarkers that they look for in breast cancer. And I was also HER2 positive in some of my cells. So that meant I had the presence of the HER2 biomarker. And that meant that they could give me targeted treatment for the HER2 positive cancer. So this project and this program is just so near and dear to my heart because it teaches me to bring this information to you guys.
So Kaya, so this has really helped you personally, knowing how to handle your own treatments and things that you were doing for yourself.
Yes, understanding my biomarkers were really important to my journey. Not only did I have cancer biomarkers, I had a hereditary predisposition to cancer. And so understanding that through my journey helped me decide. Knowing my hereditary predisposition actually told me, my oncologist at the time told me that it meant that I was actually responded better to some chemotherapies. So there's so much our biomarkers can tell us, and it's just so important that everyone understands what they are, and then understands what to do with that information. So the Tigerlily Foundation is trying to do everything they can to make this information accessible to the community so that when you guys understand what might be driving your cancer or what, different mutations you have that could affect your journey, how do you use that information to make the best decisions for yourself?
Thanks, Kai. You made an important point around how important biomarkers are. But in addition, I want to now turn to Eunice to talk a bit about clinical trials. And again, I'm sure a lot of people are much more familiar with what a clinical trial is than a biomarker. But just again, so that we're all on the same page, clinical trials test new treatments to make sure they're effective for everyone. And I think we all know that there's a lot of issues around that, and especially access to everyone who's participating in those trials. But Eunice, can you tell us how the CHOICE program has helped you understand how to access clinical trials?
So being a healthcare worker, as well as a clinical trial participant, I realized that, and a huge breast cancer awareness advocate, I realized that I did have the voice to be able to change and impact these patients. So while I have them in that few minutes of their mammogram, I'm able to educate them. Working with the CHOICE program has allowed me, even in my own personal experience, it's become empowering to even learn more about clinical trials and the impact that they have on people, again, even with my own personal experience. So even during the last few weeks, I was talking with my patients like, hey, do you know about clinical trials? And what does it mean to you? And the fear that people have, the main thing is a fear. And I realized that a lot of people just fear the unknown. It's just because they're just not educated on what clinical trials are. And I tell them in my own experience, hey, my children, my daughter is here today, and she can tell you my children would just tag along with me as early as young as 5 years old. They were participating in clinical trials. And for even my personal experience, it just allowed me to know that I was, I guess, impacting research, not even now, but for future. And of course, when my kids were young, they were like, "Mom, we felt like lab rats." But as they got older, and again, just to be educated on what a clinical trial is, and again, how it can impact people. And there was even with the COVID vaccine, I participated with that. And just to know that it did get a little, there was a time I got a little uncomfortable with it, and I did withdraw. So, and that's the one good thing about clinical trials, that at any time you are able to withdraw from it. But at the same time, it has just been a wonderful experience knowing that I'm able to just, with this project, to educate myself more, and as I have been educated, to even educate the community more along with my patients.
Can I just ask one question? How are you selected to do the clinical trials? Your doctor or your lab reports, or how are you selected?
So we have lots, thank you for that question. We have lots of information, even afterwards, that we can access to about signing up. For my own self, that even some of the websites that are listed in the folder, that's how I signed up. And some of the clinical trials, which are great, like they offer compensation for your time, gas. I even had for NIH clinical trials, they would pick me up. My kids, when they were younger, they got toys with it. So there are always nice little gifts that come along with it. And again, just to know that you're affecting and impacting research for now and your future generations. Just a wonderful feeling. But we do definitely have that information to give you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that excellent question. I mean, that's exactly why meetings like events like this are so important, because we don't know a lot of things. And that's why it's so important to have clinicians here who can really help us spread the word. So I want to go to you, Dr. Odenai. How do you talk about biomarkers to patients and families, and why it's so important in choosing treatments or trial participation? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think when speaking with families, I explain that biomarkers give us knowledge about your cancer. So we know some information, you have breast cancer, we can see some things from our pathologist, but the biomarkers give us much more specific information. And that allows us to tailor and offer treatments that are best for you. I think one thing that people worry about is, well, how do you know what's the best thing to do for my cancer, like me, not just the entire community or all patients that have breast cancer. And so the biomarkers really kind of give a unique signature for your cancer. And so then we can offer something that we think will give you the best outcome. And I really try to emphasize that it's really for the patient's best interest to pursue biomarker testing so that we can be as informed as possible when we're making treatment decisions.
Thank you. I think that information is power. Do you have another question?
Yeah. So I mean, if you know your gene markers, that's different to having biomarkers. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think those are different examples. So as Kai mentioned, there's some biomarkers that give us information about inheritance. So is this a cancer that you inherited? Is this a cancer that could also be in other members of your family, or that you could pass along? And then there's some biomarkers that are only found in the tumor itself, and that helps us inform treatment specifically.
So the BRCA gene is a good example.
BRCA is one example, the RAD51, and then we talk about triple negative, so your hormone, PR, HER2, are kind of main biomarkers that we think about for breast cancer.
I think one thing that comes up a lot is the fear. You've already mentioned it, about the fear of what a clinical trial means. I just heard the word lab rats with your kids. But I think there is some sort of conception about that. So Dr. Canzanero, I would love to find out from you, what do clinicians and researchers do to help patients safely participate, maybe ease some of those fears? Can you give us some information about what you would share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a lot of fear about participating in a clinical trial. And I think, unfortunately, some of that fear is founded by some of the horrific history that we've had with doctors doing clinical trials on patients without having adequate consent or information for those patients. And those things were truly horrible and should not ever happen. But thankfully, we have learned from that experience. And I practice at Hopkins, which is a place that has a lot of historical issues with these things, very serious. And so they have now turned that around and focused more on trying to make trials safe for patients. So there are a lot of safeguards for patients who are enrolled in a clinical trial. No one is allowed to be enrolled on a clinical trial without knowing that they're on a clinical trial, so they must be made aware of that. There's a very extensive consent process that involves something called informed consent, which is where we have to tell you exactly what the treatments you may or may not be getting are, and what the alternatives are, and make sure that you really understand what you're getting into with the clinical trial. And then the other thing that's important is that there's always the option to leave. So, if something is going on with the clinical trial and you become uncomfortable, obviously we want to try to keep patients in our trials as much as we can, but you always have the option to leave a clinical trial. So I think these safeguards are really important because clinical trials are critical for us to understand if something really is working the way that we think it is. There's a lot of really good ideas out there. There are a lot of things that work really well in cell lines, that work really well in mice, and they do not work in humans. And we don't figure that out until we do a clinical trial. And so that's why it's so important that we have these standardized clinical trials where we really learn all of this information. And because it's so important, we need to value the safety of the patients who are involved and make sure that they are understanding what's going on and that they're safe while they're participating.
So I just wanted to add what you were saying. There's another important safeguard as well, the Institutional Review Board, the IRB, which approves the protocol. So it's approved at an institutional level before you're able to give consent.
That is a fantastic point. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's not just me as the provider saying, I think this is a good idea. I have to get a lot of approvals. So there is a lot of steps that happen. Going through the Institutional Review Board is one of those. One of the things that they look at, the IRB, is the level of risk for the patient compared to the potential level of benefit. And they want to make sure that the risk and benefit are at least equal to each other so that the potential benefit to the patient must outweigh the risk before you can conduct a clinical trial.
Someone asked earlier about how you find out about a trial, but what would you, either of you doctors here, say to someone? How should they approach their doctor, their oncologist, to ask about a trial? What would you say what should they be saying to you?
I think one of the best things to say is just that you're interested in a clinical trial. Your doctor will know very well what's going on with you and what things might be available. And I think just making that statement to say, hey, I'm interested in participating potentially in a clinical trial. Are there any trial options that are open for me? Because one thing that's true about clinical trials is that they have a lot of specific criteria to be included in the study or things that they are not allowed in the study. And so not every trial is a good fit for every patient. And so your doctor can be very helpful in looking at what trials might be most beneficial for you. And then there's also fantastic website resources too that give sort of nice, plain language summaries of what the clinical trials are about. And so you can take a look at those, and if you have questions about ones that you would be interesting for you, bring them to your doctor and they can talk to you about it.
Yeah, and I think patient advocacy groups like Tigerlily is another great opportunity to hear about clinical trials. And then I'll just emphasize what you said, asking your doctor. So I think that's one of the reasons why having a really good relationship with your provider, really trusting them, trusting their intentions. So you would hope that if there's a clinical trial they're thinking of, they'll feel comfortable bringing that to you and offering that as an option.
Okay. Why don't doctors volunteer that information more? Because when I think about many of the patients that I deal with, they are not the kind of people who are going to ask or even understand clinical trials.
Yeah, and I think we're going to touch on that in a little bit. There are some inherent bias. Unfortunately, some providers might look at someone and say, they might not be interested, or for X, Y, and Z reason, I'm not going to bring this information to them. So that is one thing as clinicians that we need to improve in our practice, not, approaching someone and assuming that they wouldn't be interested in offering clinical trials to everyone. So I think that is part of it, a little bit of bias. And then in some cases, they're not appropriate for that patient, and so the doctor's not offering it because they understand that this patient might not benefit from that trial.
And I just want to add, oh, I'm so sorry.
As someone who is around 70 years of age, they also have a maximum age cutoff that seems a little unfair because seniors also could benefit from that, and they're not interested in us.
That is a great point too, and I just wanted to add too that also busyness is something that impairs doctors offering clinical trials. Sometimes they're just busy in clinic and they're focusing on the standard of care and they may not have the clinical trial come to mind, so that's part of why it's helpful to have patients ask. Then getting to your point about certain inclusion and exclusion criteria, that is usually set up by the clinical trial designers, and there has been a lot of recognition in recent years that there is sort of this copying and pasting of the inclusion and exclusion criteria that included things like age, or association with other comorbidities, like other diseases that their patients might have, whether or not BMI, whether or not they have brain metastases. And that when they were just sort of not thoughtfully thinking about these exclusion criteria, that we were excluding patients who really should have been included in these clinical trials. So I think there's a lot more awareness of that now and focus on making sure that our exclusion criteria when we're designing clinical trials are thoughtfully done in a way that, like, this really is a biological reason why this isn't going to be safe for this person, not just this is a copy and paste forward, so we can include more patients and get more information. It's a great point.
A little bit of comment about this. Maybe why doctors does not recommend we go to the things. I'm a family medicine physician, and a lot of time we do not know any like a specific clinical trial going on with things that happen. So a lot of time it is highly specialized, and also MRD already has to be approved, and then that's the one is oncology or like pulmonology, and those specialists they are the one is to find the people who want to do the clinical trial. So majority of people who comes to the family medicine and they are not know any kind of the clinical trial case at all. So we cannot offer what's going on.
And that's another piece where Tigerlily and others are very helpful, just because they can help patients become more aware of what might be relevant.
There's a question over here, and I'm gonna come here, and then I'm gonna go back over here. I love that we're just melding the Q&A. Yes, sir.
So, I have two questions. But first question is, as a patient, let's say your provider doesn't make you aware of clinical trials. Is there a way for you to find out personally yourself doing research what kind of clinical trials are? The second question is, what are some of the risks associated with participating?
So I can just answer what resources are available. There is a website that's just clinicaltrials.gov. So you can go there. I actually haven't used it personally myself just yet. I do plan to, because my oncologist has recommended that I join a clinical trial for some of my medical needs. So I need to go and explore what options there are for me. So I do plan to go look there. Tigerlily also has Tiger trials on their website as well that you can use. You can search for clinical trials that work for you. So that could be your start. You go and find out about a trial you think will work for you, and you go ask your provider. Be your own advocate.
I'll kind of piggyback on that as well as my personal experience. Once you sign up, so my first experience with clinical trials was through clinicaltrial.gov, and then once you actually are in their database, then you can actually check off a box that actually gives them permission to go through other organizations that offer clinical trials. So in my own experience, actually, there have been times people have reached out to me like, hey, we have this study done. We see you're on this, database for clinical trials. and, they ask you whether or not you want to participate. And just recently in my own personal experience within the last 6 months, and I got my mom, she's almost 70, and I do understand that, Barry, but she was even unaware. But I recently did a clinical trial about 6 months ago that I found out that I had a certain protein, cholesterol, that is not picked up in your regular cholesterol test, which puts me at high risk for heart disease and stroke. And they said it was genetically linked. So I called my mom hey, you should do the study, and they're paying, and you find out maybe it comes from you. And she did the study, and she actually is doing so many more clinical studies as a result of that one. She's a retired nurse. So she's like, are there any more clinical studies out here? So she actually, yeah. So once you're in that database, it becomes, people will contact you.
Sorry. Can I just add to that point? So, yes, clinicaltrials.gov is an awesome resource. And I've had patients, families come and say, I read about this trial, I heard about it. Can my child participate? And we didn't have it at Hopkins. We just weren't a site that was offering that particular medication. So I was able to say, well, this trial is in New York. I can reach out to the providers there. This family was interested in traveling, and so we were able to get them onto the clinical trial in a different state. So as you're looking at trials and asking your providers, and they're not available by your provider, they might be able to connect you with someone else.
Oh, the risks. Risk of participating.
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The risks of participating are always very specific to the clinical trial. So it depends on exactly what kind of trial it is. We have everything from minimum risk trials where really all you're doing is donating a tube of blood that the scientists will then study, to things where you maybe are getting a brand new treatment that's never been given in humans before. And so that's where the IRB review comes into place, that we have to make sure that the potential benefits and that the monitoring is done appropriately. So there's obviously a lot less monitoring for a trial that's just donating a tube of blood. When you're in a trial that is a brand new drug, first time in humans, fortunately or unfortunately, because it can take a lot of time for the participants, and that can be a barrier to participation. But those trials, you're coming in all the time. We're monitoring you very closely. And one of the things that's required by the IRB is that we have a safety plan in place so that if something were to happen, we would have a plan for how to take care of it.
Great question. I actually want to So I actually just finished a clinical trial myself. It was a year-long clinical trial. And part of it was routine safety. They're looking at my blood work over time. Post chemo, my blood work, it was just not the same. I had this odd characteristic in my blood that just never would return back to normal. But when I was in my clinical trial and I got blood draws every couple of months, I literally got to watch my blood levels returning back to normal levels. So just through the monitoring for risk for my trial, I got to watch my body, healing from the trauma of my own cancer.
Wonderful.
My question is kind of like a statement. So like I am a mental health counselor myself, but I'm also dealing with breast cancer. And I think I'm really concerned about the mental emotional part of the clinical trial thing. For many people, we get referred to clinical trials when the chemo is not working. And I think that's something that I would like for you guys to talk about that part, because that's my case. The chemo's not working, so now it's time for clinical trials. But then the other thing about it is okay, you have this urgency, you have to find out about a clinical trial. But you have to work, you have to get the plumber to fix your sink, you gotta take the kid to school, and I would be interested to learn more about the choice program and how that can help you find clinical trials. But then also it's just the overwhelming part. It's you have to find something because the chemo is not working, but then also you have to live your life. And I think that's the thing about it. I don't know, I know we're talking about clinical trials, but for me, I found out about clinical trials when my chemo wasn't working. I don't know if that's the case for other people. So just addressing that, I think, is important.
So we do have angel advocates at Tigerlily Foundation. That is their story. Tamika's story from the Beacon Symposium, Megan O'Neill, who's another choice angel advocate. They are in clinical trials because their treatments don't work. And so what they have to do is just, they try the next treatment and the next treatment. And unfortunately with cancer, it's, when people say you can cure cancer, it's tough because, we in the lab know that what cancer does is it keeps changing to try to survive. So, when you get to that point, it is really tough, but clinical trials are probably the answer, right? Because your cancer is doing something very unique that the science has not been ready for just yet. And so that's what we need to study and that's what we need to do. And there are a lot of resources, which I didn't know about during my own journey. I'm learning now as an angel advocate. There's so many organizations out there that Tigerlily partners with, where they provide things like food or mental wellness retreats for patients, or just support for childcare, transportation if the trial for some odd reason doesn't. So it would just be a matter of trying to understand what support is out there, and I think that's what we angel advocates do. We try to get that information for people. So if you want to get in touch after.
Thank you.
I'll just add that these are hard conversations, and certainly as clinicians, there are hard conversations as well. Oftentimes, we try to have these conversations in the beginning when we're kind of laying out all the possibilities. So we're going to do biomarker testing in the beginning so that we have all of our options, option A, option B, option C, and kind of have a conversation about laying out what things could look like, including clinical trials if chemotherapy does not work. And so I think just encouraging to have those conversations really early on when it's less urgent and you kind of have an idea of what your doctor might be thinking, because they might already have thought about all these plans but haven't mentioned it because they weren't needed at that time.
So just a quick reflection. Julia Rowland, Smith Center staff, former director of the NCI's Office of Cancer Survivorship, your Office of Cancer Survivorship. The NCI, of course, federally funded. This is all federal dollars going to that. One reflection is we're at a point in time, particularly in breast cancer, where we have choices. It's fabulous. We have so many choices. The downside is we have choices. It's really stressful making decisions. I'm really glad we're having this forum. I wanted to follow up on your great comments though about exclusion criteria, age being one of them. So again, the big trials groups that are run out of the Cancer Institute have been very aware of this, and they're now under pressure to design clinical trials that will be representative of the people at risk for a given disease. So they can't just look at, breast cancer and 90-year-olds. It's got to be the full spectrum of individuals. And one of the things that keeps people out of trials when they're older is what we call comorbid conditions. So you might have diabetes, arthritis, heart disease, and therefore keep a study easier for drug companies. Sorry. Our sponsor. and clinicians, for that matter, because it just makes it more complicated. But it has to be a representative sample. So the good news is, the funding is going in that direction for the trials, is that they won't exclude. And it's reason to have that conversation with your physician to say, am I being excluded because of age? What do we need to look at here?
Yeah, I'm over 72, and as many times as I've gone to the doctor with HER2 positive, late stage 3D, I've never been offered a clinical trial, and I've raised it.
Obviously, there's still a lot of work to do in that area. I want to go back to
Just a quick question. Is it more? I am a 12-year cancer survivor, triple negative, and I was in Emory.
Yes.
I was at Emory. In Emory, in Atlanta, I lived in Atlanta, and that's a research hospital, university teaching hospital. Are they more prone to, because my doctor asked me, did I want to do a clinical trial? I had no idea what it was. I was like, yeah, whatever y'all got in that toolbox, I want it. I didn't care, cut it off, burn it, test it, whatever. Down for everything. But I'm wondering if because it's a teaching hospital, if they are more prone to ask you to participate in the trial.
I ain't treated at a teaching hospital.
Yeah. So the short answer I think is probably yes, but there's some caveats there. One is that there can be many clinical trials going on at a given time, and not every healthcare facility is going to have all of the trials. In fact, any given healthcare facility is only going to have a very small percentage of the trials. And sometimes at community oncology places, so outside of academic centers, they may not have any of the clinical trials open. And so I think when you're at an academic medical center, there's more likely that they're going to have some number of trials open. And again, it's not going to be everything, but they may be more interested in looking for clinical trials and maybe more willing to say, this would be a really good clinical trial option for you. We don't have this here, but I can send you to Emory or wherever so that you can be enrolled in a clinical trial if travel is something that's possible.
I was wondering, like inner city, community hospitals, lower income, are they, going to be, like, what's in it for them? Like, what prompt them to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it costs a lot of money to run a clinical trial within a given cancer center, and it requires a lot of specialized resources. So that isn't something that every place can be, but I think that's another reason that advocacy programs like Tigerlily are so important, because if patients are aware of them, then they can, they are being treated with a community oncologist. If they get to the point where the clinical trial would be appropriate, they could be referred to a place where they would have those. Yeah, great question.
I want to make sure if people have other questions. We sort of melded the Q&A with the session, but just let me know quick. But I do want to come back to particularly to Kai and to Eunice. As angel advocates, what do you know about how important it is to be doing this kind of work, having these kind of conversations, and as your work in the community around biomarkers and about clinical trials? Why is it so important that you all are doing the work that you're doing?
So one thing I learned is that whereas sometimes doctors think that people might not be interested, I'm learning how interested people are. People want to know these things. They want to understand biomarkers. They want to understand clinical trials, but it's overwhelming, right? It's a lot of information. And then, of course, your biomarkers and the clinical trials you are eligible for are specific to you. So I've learned that, to use my voice, and my voice matters. Before, I think I just sat quietly in the lab and absorbed, but I never really said much until after my own cancer journey. And after, I am finding that, with my background and with my lived experience, that is actually so valuable to the scientific community. I get to sit on boards as a patient advocate. I get to ask questions like, I asked Richard, I said, is it really necessary to exclude patients based on A1C? The answer was absolutely yes. And he explained to me why. But now as an advocate, when I am sitting on those boards, I can look at these trials and say, why are we excluding patients over 70 years old? That's going to be your population you're going to treat. You need to understand how it works in that population. Ask them. So, the fact that my voice matters so much is one of the most important things I've learned as an advocate. And, just seeing people keep approaching me just to pick my brain or have me help them design their studies like that, it's been an amazing experience for me.
And Kai, that fosters trust as well with the patients, that to know that you're looking at that and that you had that lived experience. So it's really building trust in the potential patients that will be enrolling in the clinical trial.
There's so many barriers, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many barriers we need to overcome, but we do it one step at a time. Lots of studies at a time, because there's so many at any given time. But, we're just hoping to keep breaking down the barriers to participation for everyone.
And you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
So just to piggyback off what Kai said, I feel the same way as far as my voice matters. I have worked in communities that were underdeserved and underserved or underinsured, and women that were not insured or, just underinsured. they didn't have transportation to get to, to get to the clinical trials, or they're like, what is that? And I've heard this. And so many just stipulations and barriers, and the information was not out there. Right now I work with the military at Andrews Air Force Base, and when I mention, hey, do you know about clinical trials? And they're like, no, no one ever mentions that. So I feel like that is one of the biggest barriers, is that the information is not out there. So just again, working with Tigerlily, again, just it allows me to hear my voice, turn that frustration into something, into advocacy. I know what it feels like to be treated just like a number at the doctor. I see for my patients, so being able to advocate for my patients as well as myself is what Tigerlily has allowed me to do. And it just is just giving that information out, and knowing someone is walking away with something, and even to say that, hey, I have participated in clinical trials, has been, because sometimes people want to know, like, you participate in them, and there's a lot of people just think that it's for white women. They don't think, they just get, oh, Black women participate. Yes, I have. And when I tell them, like, I have participated, my children have participated, and this is what it's done for us. And the reason why a lot of the information is missing is because I'm like, we need more information from people like you so we can improve the outcome.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, I think we've heard a lot, but I think that it's always important to take it down to the real personal and how this really does impact you. So I want to ask Kai how learning about your HER2 biomarker changed, was crucial in your journey, because I think it's important to really understand the why and what it could mean once you have these tests done.
So going back to me being diagnosed with 2 different types of breast cancer, I got the broad spectrum chemotherapies. I know it in breast cancer, what we call it the red devil. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that one. I think it was adriamycin and cytoxin that I had. Wow, and I say that those drugs are designed to kill the cancer just a little faster than it's killing you. And then I had my HER2 therapies after I completed that, and it was just night and day. I would get my chemotherapy. I would go to work in the lab. I worked at Hopkins, and I was also treated at Hopkins. So I'd go to work in the morning, get my HER2 therapies in the afternoon, and be back to work on Tuesday. So when I was treated for HER2, I got to see how the quality of life is so much improved when you get a targeted treatment. And I do want to take some time to tell everyone here today that this entire event is sponsored by Roche, and they want to make sure that what they want to see is more people like us in their trial. And so there's an opportunity here for anyone that has HER2 positive breast cancer or does not know their HER2 positive status. If you are late stage and in your first line of therapy, we would love to give you an opportunity to go with our partner site and get free biomarker testing under a novel 122. This is a therapy that is actually already FDA approved. So they're looking at a biomarker called PIK3CA. And this treatment has been approved for patients that are HER2 negative with the PIK3CA biomarker. It has greatly improved survival for this population. So now there's a clinical trial with an approved drug, so you don't have to be scared that you're a guinea pig, right? You are getting something that's already approved, where if you are HER2 positive, they are looking to see the increase in survival for these patients. So anyone who is interested in going to get this free biomarker testing, we are partnered with Georgetown and MedStar, Dr. Amy Chatalia's team. If you guys go to the CHOICE website for the Tigerlily Foundation and scroll to the bottom, you will see the participating sites for this trial. They are also interested in any patients that are interested in clinical trials outside of that. They will also look into your options if you give them a call and tell them you are interested. So we do have to thank Roche for this opportunity to first let us educate you guys and make you understand that you have these options, and then give you an option to participate in a trial if you are interested and able.
So this is why it matters. I mean, Kai's story really represents why getting that testing can really change, the Red Devil experience to a treatment that is really tailored to what they know and works for you. I know we already weaved in a lot of questions, so I want to make sure we have a chance for people to have questions before we move into the next segment of the Mel.
So I am a almost 8-year breast cancer survivor. I'm playing sound bath at the end of this session. And the reason why I got interested into sound healing is how it helped me emotionally through my recovery. And going off of this woman's question, we're talking a lot about clinical trials that have to do with medicines, like physical medicines going into our bloodstream or orally taken. And the cancer center that I went to for my surgeries and treatment is Memorial Sloan. It's has a very robust integrative health medicine center. It has Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, art therapy, everything possible except sound healing. And I am so curious to learn more if there are clinical trials or if there is a movement to have more data showing how sound healing helps in the mental, emotional, and also physical recovery of cancer patients. I have experienced it personally, and my goal is hopefully to participate in that as a practitioner to provide the data, because it would be wonderful to have that covered by insurance through integrative medicine. Love to hear your thoughts.
So those are all really important aspects, treatment aspects, right? Outside of the medicines, outside of the chemotherapy. I think as a scientific community, we've done a little bit of a disservice. We haven't really highlighted and researched these aspects as complementary treatment adjuncts, but I agree we do need to do more. I think at least in pediatric cancers, there's been research in art therapy and music therapy. These are studies that kids and their families enroll to kind of see how their quality of life is during their treatment. And I would encourage you guys, as you're thinking about clinical trials, to be looking at these trials too, because they're often in the setting of a clinical trial. So it might not be a treatment approach, but it might be looking at ways that you can improve your quality of life while you're getting your chemotherapies or your targeted therapies. So I applaud you for all the work that you're doing. We definitely need to do more and study it more.
So I wanted to answer that question. The City of Hope does a lot of clinical trials around that, survivorship and quality of life. So I actually was in a clinical trial, didn't know I was in a trial. So after treatment, I was really going through a lot of depression, anxiety, because when treatment stops, they're like, okay, see you in 3 to 6 months, and you're like, well, cancer's gonna come back. You're scared, your life is different, your hair is long, your boobs all jacked up. You're like, what else happened? Somebody gave me something to deal with. And so I got someone called me and said, okay, do you want to be in this thing where they're going to send you some, a journal, and then just journal first, and then we'll have someone call you and see how journaling helped, and then maybe start doing like coaching, and then we'll see how the coaching one-on-one, saying how you feel, how that helped. And then I got a thing of essential oils, and they taught me how to meditate, but I had no idea I was in a clinical trial. They made it so easy, right? And so I always said I was never in a trial, but it was more behavioral quality of life, and to your point, like the spiritual, mental health aspect of it. So City of Hope's really good about that. Dr. Kimberly Hashing was my doctor then, and she's on my medical board now. She's amazing. But there are studies to study, not just the medical part, because your body has to work in concert. Like the intention setting I did earlier, like the mental health, the spiritual health, the how you're thinking, how you're feeling, what you're eating, it has to all come in play. So that is happening, and I can put you in touch with her. But I think that as you guys think about trials, it's not always a needle or a pill. It could be just setting how you change your behavior or how you think about cancer, or being a victim, not a victim, or saying like how you go into even stretching, qigong, exercising, and are you sleeping well, are you eating better, and how those kind of things change your potential quality of life and mental health. So those are clinical trials that have been studied, being done actually right now. At City of Hope, they have about 10 different sites I think that I'm aware of, so I can connect you with them. But for those who are here in the room, a trial is not always like injection or a pill. It could be different things about your whole cancer experience, and even as a caregiver or a patient who has a child navigating cancer with that parent.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that, Naima. The trials you're talking about for for the drugs or the interventional, there's observational ones as well, where they just want to look at your data to really look at the database and kind of match to see if there's treatments that would be available as well.
Yeah, and I would also say, Mel, that Swiss Center's actually participated in helping people recruit for some studies that are more about those sorts of things. So there are people looking into these things, and I'm also on the board of the National Organization of Arts and Health. And so we're trying to get more out there around the power of the arts, the power of music, the power of those things. It's really the mission of Swiss Center, what we do here as well. So I think it's just finding all the ways to make sure that clinical trials are looking at these issues as well. That's a great question. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Have there been any evidence on studies around like radiation after therapy, after chemo?
I feel like that's always an ongoing thing that doctors are looking at. It's just an unfortunate side effect of treatment that so many of us have to deal with. Do you know of any trials, Dr. Canzaniero?
Specifically looking at radiation after chemotherapy, I think it would be very particular to the specific question. So I'm happy to touch base with you afterwards and maybe we can talk in more detail.
I just want to add with my personal experience, when you go to these websites, you literally just type in your condition, like on the search engine of that site. And when you type in that condition, like, a lot of the studies that offer that condition, it does come up. And I also just wanted to add I find too, the clinical trial, the treatment, the patient care that you experience is just wonderful. It's a little bit more personalized. A lot of people, sometimes with clinicians feel like they get rushed, everything is time. But with the clinical trials, I do find that it's a little bit one-on-one, more personable experience. When you do have time, you feel like you're not, rushing to just ask more questions. It's a really caring experience as well.
Any other questions? I don't want anyone to leave not having questions answered, but people will be here to answer any questions yes, one more.
To kind of what she was saying earlier about mental health and kind of being part of the support system for my mother. What would you recommend that she's already in remissions, thank God, but like everyone has different clinical trials and everything. How is someone within the support system monitored outside manifestations of these biomarkers, or just paying attention? How do we do that without making this so more overwhelming than it is already?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think as a patient, you do still have connections with your care team after, so it might be good to just bring that up to them.
Okay.
Any other suggestions on that? I mean, it's an ongoing journey, right? Even 5 years out, there's still things that I worry about, right? Because I had radiation. I took how many different therapies, right, to get through mine, and you know that you can get, being a survivor is not just, yay, it's over, right? It's not over.
My mom went through the same experience with the red gun, so I was there throughout the whole experience, and
it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. I felt like there were times when I said to myself, my spirit has to be in this with me. Like, it's not just my body, it's my spirit. I had a colleague that told me, she's like, it was Ava. She was like, when you're getting your treatment, just make sure you keep working out, there's just the physical and the mental aspect of the journey itself they're so intertwined. And I think it is important to make sure you have, perhaps look into therapy. You always have a therapist. I have a therapist on call.
Yeah. I was just curious of like other people's experiences, because I found my own kind of way to kind of get through things. Kind of funny say, exercise for her is faith and going to faith. So there's that mental aspect that really allowed her to be super strong through chemotherapy and all that. And for me, for the support system, was exercise, it was martial arts, it was I was inspired by you, sir. The Kingdom. Qigong. Because I think that allowed me to show up and to have a moment to kind of just get centered with my own body so I could show up for her. I was just curious on other people's experiences and how they got through that.
We need to get the caregivers around here.
I was just going to say thank you for all you're doing, and I actually did caregiving for my mom during her ovarian cancer journey. But it is so important that the caregivers in the room also get support, and that's why we offer support for caregivers here at Smith Center. And I was excited to hear that when we talk about create your healing basket, create the things that are going to help you stay strong, and as both for the patient as well as the family, because everyone is going through cancer, not just that person. Everyone is going through it. Your community is going through it as well. That's why it's so important to have a support system. And then sometimes that means partnering with organizations like ours, organizations like Tigerlily. We do joint programming together just so you have that kind of support. Okay, Myrtle has the last question.
This is more uncommon, but I'm a 47-year breast cancer survivor. With being here at Smith Center, doing patient navigation and helping others going to the hospital, sitting in with the patient, talking to the doctor, all of that helped me as well. So I want to say, if you give something, you get something as well.
I'm curious to know, has there been any data or statistics on women with disabilities who have participated in clinical trials? I myself, I'm totally blind, and I will be honest, I know the importance of mammograms. I did not have a good experience with a mammogram because the technician did not understand how to interpret.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Send it to you.
and I've encountered this with doctors as well. So I'm just curious to know if you guys have any data on that.
I first have to say, being a mammal tech, that just really it's so disheartening to hear that, because I make sure, I have patients who question me like, how long have you been a mammal tech? Because they always say I don't make mammograms hurt. Because sometimes it's just talking to your patient. So I am so sorry on behalf of mammal techs, because my thing is, you can't just go in there with that. The first thing I have patients do when they come in is inhale, exhale. They're already scared. So I'm so sorry that you had that horrible experience. And having a horrible experience as a mammal tech and getting your mammogram, I have patients all the time that, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. I'm coming back every year, who do not go back because of that horrible experience. There's a woman at my church who came up to me when I spoke at my church during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. She said with disability, she's in a wheelchair, and she said every time she goes, she has a horrible experience because the techs went up, oh my gosh, how are we going to do it? Like, the patient is not there, can't hear you. So I honestly feel like there actually needs to be more done. And I'm looking to figure out ways to do that community-wise, and just that, to just bring more people like you and other people from our church with disabilities, because that needs to be changed. It really does.
I have a friend she calls it nasty gymnastics. She has breast cancer and she's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Well, can we thank this amazing these are important conversations, and I hope that we will take what we've learned today and really share it out with others, because this is the way that we're going to help increase the number of people that understand about clinical trials and biomarkers. And it starts here. So thank you so much for coming and being with us today. But you've just heard a lot of information. And so we want to give you a few moments to pause a bit and reflect on what you just learned. So in your folder, there's actually a reflection and empowerment plan document. It's on the left side of the pocket. We're just going to give you a few moments to pull out your folder and take it it's on the left side of the folder. And we're going to give you just a few minutes to write down what you're thinking, what you're feeling, about what you learned, what your thoughts are.